So, artificial intelligence, the purpose of artificial intelligence is to enable computers to mimic human intelligence and behavior, right? So, as you guys might have already known, that we in artificial intelligence, we basically want the machines to work like human beings, right? So, the behavior which human beings have, the intelligence which human beings have, or the behavior which they adopt in certain circumstances, we want the machines to have similar attributes. And it is a whole domain of artificial intelligence, and in this whole domain, one subdomain is the machine learning domain, right? So machine learning is basically a subdomain of the artificial intelligence. And in machine learning, we basically want to have algorithms allowing computers to learn, make predictions, and describe data without being explicitly programmed. So you can say this is the classical definition of machine learning, in which we want the algorithms developed in machine learning to learn from certain data, and on the basis of this learning, we want them to make predictions or classifications, and we want them to describe data without being explicitly programmed, right? So this is an important thing here, that we don't want the algorithms to be explicitly programmed for everything, right? We want the algorithms to learn from some sort of data, so that they can perform the intelligence behavior. They can mimic the human behavior, and they can perform the tasks for which they were not being taught. And within the domain of machine learning, we basically have the domain of deep learning. So deep learning is basically a subdomain of machine learning, and machine learning is a subdomain of artificial intelligence. How this deep learning is different from machine learning is that in deep learning we have multi-layered neural networks, right? So the basic task of a neural network is basically to learn from the input data set, so that it can perform some classifications on the unknown data set, right? So in deep learning, this multi-layered neural network acts as a black box, because it extracts the features from the input data set and then performs classification. So normally the term deep learning is coming from the deep structure of the neural network, right? Because in machine learning we usually have some shallow neural networks, and those neural networks mostly consist of 2 to 3 layers. But in deep learning, we have more deeper networks, more deeper neural networks, which can consist of more than 2, 3, and 4 layers. So it's a multi-layered architecture, and it is designed to solve more advanced and complex problems. So in order to solve problems in data science, we have 5 questions that needs to be answered in data science, right? And all these 5 answers are basically being generated by different fields of the machine learning. So all these are basically different fields or different types and categories of machine learning. So for in question number 1, we are basically trying to see that whether it is A or B, right? So here, if I say that A and B belongs to 2 different categories or classes, and each class have certain example or instances, then in question number 1, my interest or my target is basically to classify the input patterns or input instances into either A or B. So A and B can be 2 different classes, and my interest is to classify the instances into either A or B, right? So this is question number 1, which is basically related to a classification algorithm. So in machine learning, we have certain classification algorithms, and the goal or target of those classification algorithms is to classify the input data into either two or multiple classes, right? So if I want to classify the data in either A category or B category, then it means that I am talking about classification algorithm, which is question number one. In question number two, we are interested to see that if it is weird, right? For example, I have certain data samples, and all those data samples have a sequence in them, or they are related, or maybe they have some similar underlying characteristics, right? And it can happen that a certain instance could be very much different from the other instances, right? And that different instance could be an anomaly, right? So the second question relates to the anomaly detection algorithm, in which we have certain types of data, but some other kind of data is maybe differing from the rest of the data. So it will be acting as an anomaly, and the anomaly can be caused by some noise if you are talking about some traffic data, or maybe it could be an attack that is being generated on the network. So the question number two is basically related to the anomaly detection, in which we are trying to see that whether this instance is different from the other instances. The question number three is basically related to how much or how many, right? And it comes under the regression algorithms. In regression algorithms, we are basically trying to find the value of a dependent variable on the basis of some independent variables, right? For example, I want to predict the price of a car based on some characteristics, right? So here I am interested to see how much and how many, and the regression problems are basically can be further divided into two different problems. We can talk here about the linear regression, and we can also talk here about the logistic regression. In question number four, we want to see that how is this organized, right? And this organization basically comes under the clustering algorithm. In clustering, we want to see that, for example, if we have a bunch of data, and we want to see that in this bunch of data which instances are similar to each other and which instances are different from one another, right? And based on some similarity measure, or based on some in order after analyzing the underlying characteristics of different instances, we form their groups or clusters, right? So basically we are interested in the organization of the data, and we want to see there how many groups or how many clusters are present in the whole data set. In question number 5, we are interested to see that what should I do next, right? And that mostly comes under the reinforcement learning domain, which we basically use some environment, and we basically have some feedback from the environment. And if we are working with agents, then we are rewarding the agents based on the feedback from the environment, right? So that is basically deciding that what our agent will do next. So all these fields are basically related to the machine learning domain, and here we will discuss each domain and each question or each category in detail, because all of these categories contains a number of algorithms, and we will have a detailed look on most of the common algorithms which are trying to solve problems in data science.